kinds of evils. There's moral evil, and this is where wicked actions of moral agents and the bad consequences they produce, and that's my example, my favorite example, Hitler. And actually Hitler, I mean, as horrific as what he did was, Stalin is responsible for like twice as many deaths. I watched an interesting documentary on that a while back, and I was enlightened. I didn't realize that Stalin had caused. I mean, it was a different agenda, but in a different way that he did things. Well, it's in a history class, but fascinating that he really doesn't get talked about as much. You hear Hitler, he's the guy, even though, what's that?
Everybody always talks about Hitler.
Hitler's the classic evil guy. I mean, he's just the classic evil guy. You don't hear so much about Stalin. Okay, but there's another kind of evil, and this is, we're seeing a lot of this stuff, just bad consequences that derive from the operations of impersonal natural forces, such as hurricanes. We're seeing that stuff. We're getting bombarded with that lately, and I mean, the oil spill is certainly not a natural disaster. That is a man-made mess up. But they were talking about that today. They're estimating 5 times more oil than the Valdez back in the 80s, in the Exxon Valdez.
Isn't it the size of like Rhode Island?
I don't know. Or something like that. But I don't know how many. I don't even want to quote how many gallons it was, but it was phenomenal. Well, when they've already captured how many hundreds of thousands of gallons in a matter of days, you realize, wow, it's been leaking, and it probably had more pressure before that, and it's been leaking for all this time. That's a lot of oil. How sad that they can't capture that. But yeah, you've got hurricanes, earthquakes. We're seeing lots of things going on around the world. South of our country, and where's the most recent? See, where's the most recent earthquake? I'm trying to remember when the most recent one was.
Chile?
Where?
There's one in Chile.
Chile. I think that's it. Chile was the most recent. Okay.
There's been a couple in Arkansas in the past couple weeks.
There's one in Arkansas?
There's been 2 in Arkansas.
I remember we had one allegedly when I was in high school. Now, when I was in school up in Washington State, we had one, and I felt that one. That was my first real earthquake. I had one supposedly that happened when I was in junior, senior year of high school, but here I didn't feel anything. But it sounded like a jackhammer going on downstairs. What it sounded like. I thought, what are they jackhammering downstairs? Well, it's exactly what it sounded like. Pipes. I guess it was probably the pipes rattling that gave that ding 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 sound, and just that vibration. And I went, hey, wait a minute, I know what this is, after it took me a few seconds. I'd never experienced that. I'm not from the West Coast. So. But this is, what we might call natural evils. This is terrible. This is awful. Hurricane Katrina. Anybody go down there and see that mess? What happened with that?
I've seen the aftermath.
Yeah, I went down there. I was part of the crew that went down, got deployed down there with the military unit. And wow. That was something to be seen. It was something to be seen, the devastation. If you've never seen what the force of a hurricane can do, it's something else. Boats that were, just trashed and moved, out of the water, sitting, and of course it was still flooded when we were down there. Lake Pontchartrain, all that was a mess. But fortunately, most people got out of there. There were some people that didn't make it out, and most of them were elderly. It was really sad. Okay, here's the problem of evil as described by those that are critical. Typically, it's an antagonistic or a questioning, a challenging of a theistic view. Because basically, if there's a God, why is this big mess? Why do we have these problems? Why do we have little kids going to school murdering other kids? Why doesn't this stuff stop? Why didn't somebody make this stuff stop? Ask yourself for a sec. Well, we'll get that in a minute. Okay, God is not all-powerful, so He could not stop Hitler. Okay, I'm using a practical example. He couldn't do it. He didn't have the power. Okay, that's one argument. Obviously, He's not all-powerful, or He would have fixed it if He had the power to fix it. Okay, God is not all-knowing, so He was not aware that there was was a problem. He just didn't know. He could have fixed it, but he just didn't know. He was ignorant. Okay? Alright. God is not loving, or He would have cared enough to stop such horror. Okay? Interesting point. If God is willing and able, then why all the quote-unquote evil in the world? If you accept that there is evil in the world. Okay? If there is just wrongdoing on mass scale. Now, if you don't believe anything's wrong, then, that's not a question for you. But if you do believe that there's something wrong in this world, it leaves the challenge for, if there's a God, why don't you do something about it?
That's almost like when your kid's learning and developing and stuff like